Expressionism began as a modernist movement in art before the First World War, and was particularly common in Weimar Germany in the early 20th century. It started as an art movement where modernist painters like Wensley Kandinsky and Franz Marc formed an art society called the Blue Rider in Munich in 1911, advocating art beyond realist approach. Through expressing ends and intense emotion in painting and poetry, Expressionism in Germany somehow contrasts with the lack of compassion and connection in the Weimar society due to dehumanizing industrialization. And its influence also gradually spread from art to film industry and eventually expanded beyond an art movement of emotion. Criticized as a degenerate art by the Nazi Party during the Second World War, German Expressionism had developed beyond simply an art movement. It's a political statement featuring human distortion and ideological tendency after the trauma of the First World War, or, as Douglas Skinner described, a self-conscious movement in history of art and literature with no essence of expressionism that allows itself to be captured in one simple definition. German Expressionism is a political rebellion against social distortion and instability through the means of radical destruction and regression. In search of a new way out among the chaos and confusion after the First World War, the secularity of Expressionism in Germany gave rise to not only the individualistic creation in painting, sculpture, or literature. It also became a revolution in the film industry, developing a unique and presidential Weimar culture that became inspiration for horror films and film noir. Devastated by the economic depression after the First World War, the Weimar society was full of anxiety and uncertainty towards the incompetent government and the disordered social structure. And murder, a scene with no turning back, mirrored the corrupt morality and social malfunctioning which inspired Fritz Lang, Robert Witt, Hans Ewers, F. W. Murnau, and many other German expressionist directors. The embargo for imports of foreign films restricted the influence of American cinema in Germany after the First World War, but somehow it also helped the development of exclusive film culture in Weimar society. Expressionist films often feature a disillusioned society in desolation, with much emphasis on the darkness of human nature by featuring twisted minds, distorted characters, and even ultra-violence. From the very beginning of Expressionist movement in German film industry, The Student of Prague in 1913 features a protagonist with distorted mind of lust and desire, which turns him into a human with a monstrous mind. Adapting elements from Edgar Allan Poe's horror short story William Wilson, as well as Frost, The Student of Prague features a loss of innocence while virtualizing horror elements that somehow define part of expressionism in film industry in terms of the filming technique. Horror elements in The Student of Prague continued to evolve into the expressionist horror classic The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari by Robert Witt, featuring comic production design with eccentric symbols in the background and characters with exaggerating eye makeup. Robert Witt depicts William Dr. Caligari as an intellectual with traditional scholar outfit, reversing the benevolent scholar stereotype. Dr. Caligari's screenwriters Hans Genovese and Karl Mayers both discharged the Weimar institution after the First World War, and they aimed at depicting the hideous control of high authority towards civilians in a rigid society. Dr. Caligari was not simply a horror story, but also a political statement featuring distrust in the government through the rigid and inhumane portrayal of the higher authority in the film. German expressionist film has never been simply an artistic approach, but a political means. To Fritz Lang, rising crime rates and murder cases in the Weimar Germany was a reflection of hidden hideous human nature. He saw murder as a consequence of the social distortion arise from social uncertainty and depression, and he intended to express the confusing darkness in the society through oppressive protagonists and bizarre story setting in his expressionist films. During the background research for his expressionist classic M in 1931, Fritz Lang was inspired by various murders in Germany, including the serial killer Peter Kürten, who drank victims' blood after killing 9 people and attacking 41 people. In M, the portrayal of the child serial killer Hans Berkey in the disguise of a normal citizen somehow virtualized the hidden evil nature beneath suppression as well as the uncertainty in criminality and deviance. At the same time, Fritz Lang also emphasized the fact that the sinister is ultimately a human with ferocious nature. Fritz Lang's depiction of evil human nature and distorted humanity was part of the common theme seen in German Expressionist films. Apart from integrating real-life murder into his crime film M, Fritz Lang was also drawn to the idea of total control under an absolute authority. For Metropolis in 1927, Fritz Lang extensively used Bauhaus architecture and heavy contrasting lighting to depict the lack of compassion in a dehumanizing society. Metropolis features an authoritarian society with extreme class distinction, where people survive lifelessly under total control of the government. Somehow implies the negative consequence of industrialization and modernization in Germany. In 1936, Fritz Lang created The Testament of Totem Abuse, featuring a submissive community led by an absolute authority. As commented by Professor Tom Gunning, The Testament of Totem Abuse actually mocked the uprising of Hitler, and the story actually predicts the seizure of power by the rising Nazi Party in Germany. Featuring a madman from asylum dreaming of taking over the city with his plan of a crime empire, the bizarre setting in his film, such as deformed buildings with a realistic design and intense shadowing, create a sin city where Totem Abuse with a traditional bachelet figure attempted to control the city with his ruthless ultra manipulation. The Testament of Totem Abuse features ordinary citizens from different social classes of the society, and almost all fall into totem abuse manipulation, juxtaposing with the rising control of Hitler in Germany in pre-Second World War period. Apart from mocking political figure in his film, Fritz Lang also depicts emptiness and loneliness of the Weimar society through the portrayal of minor citizens from different social classes in the world of totem abuse. Through films, Fritz Lang extends Expressionism beyond the cinematography by incorporating identity confusion and desperation in a disordered society into his films, which matches with the political turmoil he experienced in the pre-Second World War Germany. From banning the screening for The Testament of Totem Abuse to the appointment of Fritz Lang as the head of film studios in Germany in 1933, the power of Nazi Party in the film industry became more and more obvious to intellectuals in Germany. It eventually forced him and other expressionist directors to flee from Germany. No one, including Fritz Lang, has thought of leaving the legacy of German Expressionism in the Hollywood through its influence on Gothic horror and film noir. German Expressionism spread its experimental tricks of lighting and bizarre story to the America long before the massive fleet of German intellectuals. Starting from the 1920s, co-production films between Germany and the United States result in the injection of expressionist filming technique into American horror films like The Phantom of the Opera and Dracula. The development of expressionist film in Hollywood speed up as more and more German directors fled to the States due to rising control and censorship by the Nazi Party in the film industry. After his escape in 1933 in Germany, Fritz Lang began to explore human nature in American context with his Hollywood debut Fury in 1936. Featuring a young couple arriving the States for the pursuit of American dreams, Fury illustrates the distortion of humanity due to growing revenge. But then, instead of simply focusing on the fault in the system, Fritz Lang turned his focus into how the system turns ordinary citizens into complete madness. His aversive feeling towards the Nazi Party did not fade away after his settlements in the States. In fact, he began to explore American story intertwined with anti-Nazi elements in the 1940s, such as The Return of Frank James.
Where was he?
Sorry, I can't talk without thinking, not being a lawyer.
And most notably, Ministry of Fear in 1944. In Ministry of Fear, Fritz Lang inserted fear in daily life to show war as a platform to reveal the barbaric side of human nature. Featuring spy acting as blind to win the trust of the protagonists to steal the microchips with national secret hidden in a cake. Fritz Lang depicts war as a lunatic race hidden in the society under the massive control of the authority, recognizing the Nazi Party's control over the nation and its desire for victory. No one could imagine the transformation of German Expressionism in Hollywood, as Fritz Lang became more and more successful in immersing visual expressionist elements into his crime drama thriller in the Hollywood. German Expressionism differentiates into new genres in the state, as its dramatic expressionist technique became huge inspiration for film noir and Gothic films. Despite fading Expressionism in Germany due to Nazi censorship over the film industry, the presidential creation of vampire and monsters in German Expressionist film, such as the Count Outlaw in F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu, the primitive sleepwalker Caesar in the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and the infamous Dracula in Dracula, also became huge inspiration for Gothic films to continue the legacy of Expressionism in their horror setting. German Expressionist films extensively features distorted reality and hideous human nature through unrealistic cinematic setting and heavy contrasting lighting, as well as strong shadowing in the scene. As more and more German cinematographers and directors moved to Hollywood, they also brought Expressionist filming technique to the American cinema. Apart from the Expressionist approach to the use of shadow and light, film noir also features imperfect anti-heroes and oppressive figures with sinister behaviors. The low-key lighting in Expressionist film, for example, was also used as a sign of evilness. For film noir like Citizen Kane in 1941, low-key lighting continued to take an important role to signify visual tension and disjoint mood. Positive portrayal of criminals firstly appeared in Fritz Lang's M, where cynical criminals was seen as protagonists. This approach continued to appear in film noir like Michael Curtis' Casablanca, and also Hitchcock's Strangers on the Train. German Expressionism influenced horror master Hitchcock much when it comes to the horror genre, but he managed to transform the horror from a visual presentation into a psychological remarks. Meanwhile, dramatic Gothic evil creature in Expressionist films also inspired a Gothic revival in Hollywood in modern days. To directors like Tim Burton, Gothic setting even became his trademark, which has drawn a cult following among the mainstream pop culture. Despite an end to the German Expressionist movement in film industry due to Nazi takeover, Expressionism flourished and mutated as the intrinsic elements in Gothic horror and film noir that serve as a huge inspiration for modern film industry. As Fritz Lang visualized his imagination of future in Metropolis in 1927, directors in different eras keep on sourcing back to Expressionism as its trace reappears at the base setting in Ridley Scott's Blade Runner in 1982, and also Tim Burton's Batman Returns in 1998. German Expressionism is a degenerate art, Nazi Party once said. Perhaps the legacy of German Expressionism in modern times could provide a different view.